My name is Zoe Harper, and I still remember the exact moment I stopped being the daughter. They stopped pretending to love equally. 1 year after my college graduation, I stood across the street watching flames consume the house I rebuilt with my bare hands. And when Chelsea, my twin sister, stood sobbing on the curb screaming about faulty wiring, I didn't flinch. I just whispered, "You should have left well enough alone." Have you ever been betrayed by the people you thought would protect you most? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever had to take your power back in silence. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The backyard was dressed in white tents and Pinterest-perfect florals, the kind of setting that whispers, "We have our life together," even if no one under the canopy actually does. It was our college graduation party, mine and Chelsea's. We're twins, fraternal and emotionally mismatched since birth. She's the spotlight, I'm the stagehand. That's just how it's always been. The clink of champagne glasses, the smell of overpriced catering, the low jazz hum floating above our relatives' polite laughter, it all felt normal. Until my mother, Jocelyn, stood beside the outdoor fireplace and raised her wineglass with an exaggerated twinkle in her eye. "We are so proud of our girls," she began, giving Chelsea's shoulder a little squeeze. "You both graduated with honors, and that's no small thing. Your father and I wanted to celebrate with something special." I straightened slightly. Something in her tone, it wasn't the usual shallow praise she threw around like glitter. It'd weight, like something real was about to happen. Then came the sound of a box opening. A velvet-lined jewelry box. No, something heavier. Metal clinked. Dad, ever the silent partner in their showy marriage, pulled out a sleek white key fob attached to a delicate rose gold keychain. He dangled it in the sun for everyone to see. "Chelsea, your new apartment downtown is waiting for you, 26th floor skyline view, fully furnished." Gasps, applause, and Chelsea's perfectly performed gasp in return. She let out a squeal so high-pitched, I watched our elderly neighbor's poodle jolt awake from its nap. "Oh my God, are you serious?" she shouted, rushing forward. "The one near the Riverwalk." Mom smiled indulgently. "Of course, darling. You deserve something inspiring to begin your future." She flung her arms around them both, practically purring as flashbulbs went off. Aunt Danielle was already filming on her phone, and I just stood there. My lemonade had gone warm in my hand. Everyone turned as if realizing simultaneously that I was still there. That's when Dad tossed something in my direction. It wasn't a fob or gold or even clean. A ring of 3 rusty brass keys landed at my feet with a faint metallic jingle. "Zoe," Mom said, not quite making eye contact. "There's a property on the east side. Needs a little elbow grease. Think of it as a blank canvas." Blank canvas, it sounded like a warning. I bent down and picked up the keys. One had a plastic label still attached. 37C Oakley shed out back needs work. The tag was faded, like it had been written a decade ago. "Is this a joke?" I asked, blinking at her. "Chelsea gets a penthouse and I get a fire trap," Chelsea giggled. "It's not that bad, right?" she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Why do I always get less?" The words came out sharp, unfiltered. I wasn't trying to make a scene, but the burn behind my eyes gave me away. No one answered, not Mom, not Dad, not even Chelsea, who had already gone back to filming her apartment reveal on Instagram. "I asked you a question," I said louder. The wind picked up a little, rustling the napkins. Someone cleared their throat. Still nothing. Not even a glance of discomfort from my parents. It was like I didn't exist, so I dropped the keys, let them hit the slate stone with a clatter, and I turned and walked away past the guests, past the pastel balloon arch, past the Chardonnay-sipping relatives pretending they hadn't just watched a daughter get handed a slap in the face. Behind me I heard Chelsea laugh again, but in my chest, something had gone silent, like a door I hadn't realized was open had finally slammed shut. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was how they saw me, and it hurt more than I'll ever be able to put into words. But that was the moment I decided I would never ask them for anything again. Not help, not love, not permission. They gave me a ruin, fine. I'd turn it into a crown. And one day they'd choke on it. That night I curled up on the creaky twin bed I'd slept in since middle school, a ceiling crack above me shaped vaguely like Texas staring back like a cruel joke. My diploma sat on the desk, still in its leather folder. I hadn't even taken it out yet. The keys, those 3 rusted scraps of insult, were sitting next to it, catching what little light the cracked overhead fixture gave off. I didn't cry. I felt like I should have, but instead it was worse. That quiet ache where anger burns out and you're just left hollow. I grabbed my phone, stared at the screen for a minute, and then finally texted the one person who knew me better than I knew myself. Zoe, what did I do to deserve this? The typing dots appeared immediately. Marissa, you existing too quietly. That's what, want me to come over? I hesitated before replying. Zoe, yeah, bring ice cream. And maybe a shovel so I can bury myself in the yard. She replied with a skull emoji and a series of snack gifs. 20 minutes later, she was at my window like we were teenagers sneaking out for joyrides. I didn't even wait for her to knock, just opened the screen and let her climb in. Your mom glared at me like I was selling drugs, she said, setting a plastic bag of snacks on my bed. Do I look like a threat in these bunny slippers? Marissa was 5'0" with the attitude of a 6-foot linebacker and a heart that had always made room for my pain, even when I tried to hide it. She pulled out mint chip ice cream and 2 plastic spoons. I took one without a word and started eating straight from the tub. So, she said after a minute, tell me again why they gave Chelsea the penthouse suite and handed you a live-in tetanus risk. I don't know, I mumbled, my mouth still cold. She's always been the favorite, the fun one, the one who deserves things, I guess. Marissa rolled her eyes so hard I swear she saw into another dimension. No one deserves a fully furnished skyline apartment for remembering to breathe through college. They didn't even look at me when I asked why, just nothing, like I wasn't worth answering. Because if they look too closely, she said, they'll have to admit what they're doing, and that's inconvenient. We sat in silence for a bit, then she looked over at the keys. So where exactly is this horror movie set they dumped on you? I gestured vaguely at the key tag. Somewhere on the east side, Oakley Avenue, she blinked. Wait, Oakley, that area where Google Maps refuses to show street view. Yup. A beat, we're going, she said, standing up. Grab your hoodie and keys, I brought gas and a sense of righteous indignation. I actually laughed for the first time that day. You're serious? I just bought mace and filled my tank, I feel unstoppable. We piled into her old Civic, the one with the glitter steering wheel and the scent of cinnamon gum soaked into the seats. As she drove, we passed strip malls and then empty sidewalks, streetlights flickering in uneven rhythms like a warning. The city thinned out into that odd kind of quiet that doesn't feel safe or peaceful, just forgotten. There, I said, pointing as we approached a crooked mailbox with the number 37C barely hanging on. That's it. Marissa slowed to a crawl. Girl, that's not a house. That's a dare from the universe. It stood back from the street like it was ashamed. Vines clawed their way up the side like fingers dragging down the walls. The porch sagged in the middle like a tired back, and the front door looked like it had been kicked in once and never quite recovered. No lights, no sign of life. I unlocked the front gate with a creak that sounded like a warning from a ghost. Come on, Marissa whispered. Let's meet your charming new estate. I pushed open the gate, heart tight in my chest, and walked toward the house that was supposed to be my gift. And I knew deep in my gut, this was the moment everything started to change. We stood frozen on the cracked concrete walkway, the house looming in front of us like it had something to say, and none of it good. Okay, Marissa whispered, squinting at the roofline. That gutter is being held up by hope and a single nail. The grass had long since surrendered to weeds, and vines, thick and alive with intention, wrapped themselves around every visible beam. One of the windows was boarded up, another just missing. The screen door hung off one hinge, gently swaying with the night breeze like it was trying to warn us away. Still, I stepped forward. My fingers tightened around the key, already rusted at the teeth. Zoe, Marissa said cautiously, I'm gonna be honest. If I saw this place in a horror movie, I'd yell at the screen for the girl to turn around. Same, I murmured. But the girl never listens. She sighed. Then I guess I'll be the best friend who follows and sarcastically survives. I slid the key into the knob. It stuck for a second, then finally gave way with a rough, metallic click. The door creaked open with a sound that went straight to my spine. The air inside was stale, like an attic sealed too long, but there was something else beneath it. A hint of something burnt, something ruined. We stepped inside. My sneakers crunched over what I realized was shattered glass mixed with dirt and peeled paint. The hallway was narrow and dark, and the wallpaper was curling like old parchment. Marissa fumbled for her phone flashlight. Oh my God, she whispered. This place looks like it got divorced from the concept of safety. We moved further in. The front room had no furniture, just a collapsed bookshelf in one corner and an old ceiling fan hanging low, two of its blades broken clean off. The walls had long stains that trailed from the ceiling down like old tears. And then we saw the scorch marks. An entire section of the left wall was blackened, charred. The plaster crumbled at the edges, and the smell of soot hit sharper now that we were closer. Marissa stepped carefully toward the wall and tapped it with the back of her knuckles. Ash dust drifted down like dark snow. "This place was in a fire," she said softly. I didn't reply. I walked into what might have once been the dining room, but the chandelier had melted into twisted copper. A window frame stood empty, with vines curling through like fingers trying to claim it. I could feel my chest tightening. This wasn't just needs elbow grease. This was abandoned, broken in ways no college grad could fix, especially not one with $148 in her bank account. And suddenly all the fire I'd been running on anger, betrayal, pride collapsed. I sat down right there in the dust. Not dramatic, just quiet, exhausted. "They knew," I said softly, staring at the floorboards beneath my feet. "They knew this place was like this. They didn't hand me a blank slate, they handed me trash and called it character." Marissa crouched beside me, resting a hand on my knee. "Zoe," I shook my head. "I'm so tired of pretending it doesn't hurt, of acting like it's okay to always be the one who gets the leftovers, the cheap seats, the rusted keys. What did I do wrong, Mar?" "You didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice low but steady. "You were just born second, that's all." Her words weren't cruel, they were just true. "I worked just as hard," I said, my voice cracking. "I got the same GPA, I didn't party, I didn't flunk out, I didn't screw up, and this is what I get." Marissa didn't try to argue. She just looked around, then stood and flicked the nearest light switch, because of course she did. There was a brief spark, a pop, and then the overhead bulb sizzled before going dark again. "Well, on the bright side," she said, brushing off her jeans, "we know the wiring's alive enough to be dangerous." I laughed through my tears. It was ridiculous. The whole thing was a cosmic joke and I was the punchline. But then Marissa turned back to me, her expression softening. "I know this looks like a grave," she said. "But maybe it's not, maybe. It's a blank canvas that just forgot it was meant to be something beautiful." I stared up at her. "You're serious?" she nodded. "I mean, think about it. Fire already ripped through here. Nature's trying to eat it. It can't get worse." I raised an eyebrow. "That's your pitch." She grinned. "You know I suck at pep talks, but look around, Zoe. There's no further to fall. So maybe you rebuild, not because you owe them anything, but because this time it's yours." I looked around the empty shell of the house, the bones of it quietly waiting. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the place I unlearned everything they ever made me believe about myself. 3 days after our late-night horror house tour, I was standing barefoot in the center of the living room wearing rubber gloves, hair shoved into a messy bun, with a dust mask strapped across my face like a post-apocalyptic survivor. Marissa had shown up that morning armed with her sketchpad, a second-hand tape measure, and a level of enthusiasm I couldn't match but was grateful for. "Step 1, she declared, dramatically rolling out a strip of craft paper across the grimy floor. "We clear the space and chart what we're working with. Step 2, you promise not to cry when I show you what this could become." I eyed the ash-stained walls and dangling wires. "What's step 3? She smirked. "We become legends." We started with the entryway. The coat closet had no door, just 2 busted hinges and a smell I decided not to investigate. We ripped up what remained of the carpet, rotted through in places, and underneath, to our shock, were hardwood floors. Worn, splintered, faded. But real wood. "Original," Marissa whispered like she'd found buried treasure. "We're keeping this. I don't care if we have to sand it by hand with a nail file." I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to fight her optimism, and maybe I didn't want to. We worked for hours. Tearing down warped curtains, scraping off wallpaper that flaked like old skin, sweeping debris into contractor bags with cheap brooms that seemed to break every other hour. By noon, I was covered in dust, mascara had streaked from sweat and my arms ached. But something strange was happening. My thoughts weren't looping through the betrayal anymore. I wasn't imagining Chelsea sipping lattes on her rooftop terrace while I coughed on plaster. I was, here, in this moment, moving forward, even if just an inch. Marissa was kneeling by the fireplace, sketching something in quick, confident strokes. "Navy," she muttered to herself. "Maybe a moody navy in the kitchen, contrast it with warm, reclaimed wood." No one expects drama in a fixer-upper, but I live for it. You're color scheming a place with no electricity, I said, flopping onto the floor next to her. That's how you manifest the glow-up, she replied, passing me the notebook. Her design was rough, but even in lines and scribbles, I could see what she saw. Floating shelves made from salvaged wood. Bold, dark walls. A kitchen island cobbled together from flea market finds. Textured layers and soft gold accents. Not shiny or new but alive. Earned. We took a break on the front porch, sipping lukewarm lemonade and letting our legs dangle over the edge. I don't get why you care so much, I finally said. About this, about helping me. Marissa blinked, confused. Because you're you, Zoe. And because if we can turn this death trap into something beautiful, maybe. I don't know, maybe we can prove that you were never the problem. The silence stretched between us, heavy and soft at the same time. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Later that afternoon, we started cleaning out the back bedroom, what was once probably a child's room if the chipped pink paint was anything to go by. As I lifted a warped dresser drawer from the closet, something fell from behind it and rolled to my feet. It was a ceramic angel. One wing broken. Half its face melted into an unrecognizable swirl of glaze. But the rest of it, its hands clasped in prayer, its feet barely visible in a flurry of ceramic folds, was intact. I picked it up slowly, brushing the dust from its base. I knew this angel. It used to sit on my windowsill as a kid. My mother bought it at a church bazaar when I was 7. I remembered because Chelsea knocked it off the windowsill once during a tantrum, and I had glued it back together with clear nail polish and tears. But that was years ago. How is this here? I whispered. Marissa walked over and knelt beside me. You think they just dumped everything here after the fire? I didn't answer. I was too busy turning the angel over in my hands, trying to make sense of how a piece of my childhood had ended up in the ashes of this house. Maybe this was never random, she said gently. Maybe this place chose you. I looked around at the scorched walls and broken light fixtures. Nothing about it felt like a gift. But this angel, this tiny, half-melted thing that had once mattered to me, it felt like a message, that even in ruin, something survived. As the sun dipped low and filtered gold through the broken blinds, Marissa turned on the portable speaker she'd brought and blasted some indie rock anthem about building from the bones. We scrubbed walls until our hands went raw and our laughter echoed through the empty rooms like we belonged there. And for the first time in days, I felt something other than anger. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could make this house my own. Not for them, not to prove anything, but because I wanted to. There was nothing glamorous about waking up at 6:00 a.m. to open at the bookstore cafe, then heading straight to a house that still smelled faintly of smoke and wet drywall. But routine became its own comfort. Coffee, shift, then scrubbing until my knuckles ached. Dinner was whatever I could microwave. Showers were lukewarm at best. City water was unreliable on this side of town. Still, I kept showing up. And so did Marissa. I had a dream about a navy wall, she said one evening, flinging open the back door with 2 paint swatches in one hand and a bag of kettle chips in the other. A navy so bold it makes people gasp. Like, did she really paint that entire kitchen wall this color? Yes, she did. I smiled, brushing plaster dust from my hoodie. You know we still don't have plumbing in the back bathroom, right? That's phase 3, she waved dismissively. We're in phase 1.5, distract from the chaos with bold visual choices. By then, we had power in most of the house. The wiring had been patchy, but a local electrician agreed to rework it at cost when Marissa showed him our design sketch and explained it was a self-funded rescue project. People were starting to help. It was weird, honestly. Earl, the neighbor from 2 houses down, stopped by one afternoon while I was dragging out warped shelving. He wore overalls, smelled faintly of motor oil, and had a limp that made his steps uneven on the cracked sidewalk. You the girl cleaning up this wreck? He asked. That's me, I said, brushing sweat off my forehead. He nodded slowly, then looked at the house like it owed him something. Belonged to my cousin's ex-wife once, before the fire. I didn't know that, I said. Yeah, place's got bones, though. Shame to see it rot, you fixing it up alone. My best friend's helping, she's inside plotting color crimes. He chuckled. You need cabinets, I blinked. Excuse me. I redid my kitchen last year, got the old ones stored in my garage. Wood's solid, bit scuffed but better than what's in there now. I didn't even try to hide my surprise. You'd give them to us, Carl shrugged. Rather see them used than molten. I'll bring him over in the morning. I was still staring at the empty spot where he'd stood 5 minutes after he left. Inside, I told Marissa, and she whooped so loud she scared a squirrel out of the living room vent. I'm telling you, she said, grinning as she stirred a questionable instant ramen, this house has guardian angels, or at least very bored neighbors. The cabinets arrived the next day, and while a few were missing doors and one had a suspicious smell we quickly neutralized with vinegar and prayers, they were solid. Real oak. Not the particle board junk we could never afford. Marissa resanded the fronts and painted them the same rich navy she had dreamt about. We added gold pulls, flea market finds she scored for under $10 total, and suddenly the room wasn't just livable. It was beautiful. One night, we sat on the kitchen floor, our backs against the freshly painted wall, sweat drying on our necks, sipping flat root beer from mugs because we hadn't unpacked any glasses yet. I don't think they'd recognize this place if they walked in, I said. Marissa nodded. Good. The music was still playing in the other room, some lo-fi beat that had become our renovation soundtrack. My arms ached, my shirt was stained beyond redemption, and I had a blister on my thumb from holding a paintbrush too tight. But I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. This house wasn't perfect. Not even close. But neither was I, and maybe that was the point. The day I moved in for real, it rained. Not the heavy, dramatic kind that drenches you for effect, just a soft, persistent drizzle like the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to cry or not, which ironically was how I felt too. The floors were done. The walls were painted. The cabinets gleamed in their navy and gold glory. We'd swapped out the front door for a salvaged one Marissa found at a salvage yard, painted fire engine red because, in her words, you need a little drama to announce a comeback. There was no couch yet. No proper dining table, but I had a mattress on the floor, my pothos plant curled in a ceramic pot by the window, and my old record player sitting proudly on a milk crate in the corner. I spun a dusty Fleetwood Mac vinyl while unpacking my thrifted plates and a mismatched set of mugs from the cafe's clearance bin. It didn't match. It didn't matter. It was mine, all of it. And yet, as the rain misted against the windows and the glow of warm light filled the space, I couldn't shake the nervous flutter in my chest. Because today, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I had invited them, Chelsea, my parents, to see the house. Marissa had side-eyed me when I told her. Are you sure? She asked. You owe them nothing, especially after, well, everything. I know, I said, but I want them to see what I built. Why? She'd asked gently. Because part of me still wants them to say it's enough. I hated that truth. But there it was. She didn't argue. Just gave me that look, equal parts worried and loyal, and said, then wear the jumpsuit, the one that makes you look like a rich recluse artist with generational trauma. At 3:15 p.m., I heard the tires crunch the driveway gravel. Their SUV looked laughably oversized parked in front of my modest little house. A few moments later, the doors opened and out stepped Chelsea in heeled boots completely unsuited for cracked pavement, and my parents in their matching windbreakers like some ironic nod to supportive suburban family. I opened the door before they could knock. Chelsea blinked once. Wait, this is the same place. I nodded, trying to ignore the way my hands fidgeted with the hem of my sleeve. Come in. They did, stepping over the threshold as if unsure they were in the right house. Their eyes scanned the room, first the gleaming wood floors, then the refinished trim, the deep navy cabinets in the kitchen catching the golden glow of sunset through the back window. My mother finally broke the silence. Well, this looks very different. Dad let out a low whistle. You did this? All of it, I said. With Marissa and help from the neighbor. Chelsea walked slowly into the kitchen, touching the cabinet poles. This is actually kind of amazing, she said, turning to me with an expression I hadn't seen from her in years. It wasn't sarcasm or performative awe, it was surprise, real, unfiltered surprise, like she hadn't thought I was capable of pulling something like this off. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or scream. I didn't think it was salvageable, she added. It looked like it had been hit by a meteor. Honestly, that would have been less work, I said, smiling thinly. Mom wandered into the hallway, peeking into the half-finished bathroom. You've done a lot of work, she said. I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a warning. Marissa entered through the back door just then, still in paint-stained jeans and holding a tray of lemonade in mismatched glasses. I brought offerings for the royal family, she announced cheerfully, handing Chelsea a glass without waiting for a reply. Chelsea looked startled. Thanks. We gathered around the kitchen island, an old butcher block we'd mounted ourselves, and sipped lemonade like it was champagne. The silence was thick. I waited for them to say something, anything, maybe even we were wrong. But no one did. Still, as they walked through the rooms, I saw the truth in their expressions. My sister wasn't faking it, she was impressed. And my parents looked like they didn't know where to place me anymore. I wasn't the quiet twin who lived in the shadows. Not anymore. And in that moment, standing barefoot on the hardwood floors I had sanded myself, watching them marvel at what they thought I couldn't do, I didn't need their validation. I had already built mine, with my own 2 hands. The first time Chelsea asked to borrow the house, it sounded innocent enough. "It's just a few friends," she said, twirling her car keys on one finger. "Nothing wild, you don't even have to be here." I hesitated. "You mean, host something here?" "Just a little cocktail night," she added quickly. "Your rooftop's kind of amazing now that it's stable again, and I already told everyone how you redid the whole place. It'll make you look like a total visionary." It was phrased like a compliment, like her party was somehow for me. I wanted to say no. Every part of me stiffened with the feeling I was being nudged back into the shadows, but she was already calling it done. "Cool, I'll keep it classy, promise." I should have stopped her right there. But I didn't. And when I got home the next morning from an early cafe shift, the scent hit me first. Wine, sweat, cheap perfume. Then came the visuals, lipstick-stained glasses crowding the sink, pizza crusts fossilized into the coffee table, and someone's red wine, bright, irreversible, soaked into the cream rug I'd just thrifted last week. The sliding door to the rooftop was still open, letting in a breeze that carried someone's cologne. I stepped outside. Beer bottles lined the railings. One was tipped over, dripping onto the floorboards. An empty salsa jar sat in a planter. My pothos had been snapped in 2. I felt sick. My house, my sanctuary, my healing, trashed. And in the center of it all, lounging in one of my salvaged patio chairs, was Chelsea, still in last night's eyeliner, sipping iced coffee like she belonged there. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey Zoe, epic party, right?" "Are you kidding me?" My voice cracked, fury rising fast. "You said a few people, not a rave." She shrugged, unbothered. "It wasn't that bad. Everyone loved the space. You should have seen how jealous they were when I told them I designed it with you." I stared at her, stunned. "You told them you helped design this?" "I mean, I was here during the housewarming. That counts, doesn't it?" "No, Chelsea, it doesn't. This is my home. You don't get to treat it like your trash bin and slap your name on it." She rolled her eyes, standing. "Relax, it's not like I broke anything important." I pointed at the "That was a vintage wool rug. You can't even buy that anymore." She blinked, unimpressed. "You care way too much about stuff. You care way too little about other people's boundaries." The words sliced out before I could soften them. She paused, then smirked. "God, you really are dramatic when you think someone's stepping on your little empire." I didn't answer. I just turned, walked back into my house, and locked the door behind her. She banged once, lightly, like it was a joke. "Seriously." I didn't open it. The next morning I called a locksmith. New locks, new codes, because I was done letting people walk in and out of my life like they built the walls I had to bleed for. It had been exactly 1 week since the party. 7 days of silence from Chelsea. 5 since I changed the locks and ignored her dramatic text. Wow, okay, enjoy being the bitter twin. I thought maybe, just maybe, we were moving into a new phase, a quieter one. One where they left me alone, and I kept building this life with my own 2 hands and chipped fingernails. Then my mother showed up. No text. No call. Just her silver SUV idling in the driveway while I was pulling weeds from the cracked garden beds. She stepped out in her usual soft neutrals, lipstick perfectly matched to her cardigan. A zippered leather planner in one hand. Like this was a PTA meeting. I stood slowly, dirt still under my nails. "Zoe," she said with a gentle smile I didn't trust. "Can we talk?" Every instinct screamed no, but I stepped aside and let her onto the porch. She didn't sit. She glanced around, took in the painted trim, the potted rosemary on the windowsill, the lemony scent from the candle Marissa had left burning that morning. "This is actually quite lovely," she said, her voice almost wistful. "I wasn't sure it could be turned around, but you did it." "Thanks," I said stiffly. Then came the shift. Her tone dipped into something softer, forced, calculated. "We have a situation with Chelsea," she began, clasping her hands. "She's been going through a rough time." I stared at her. "She had to sell the apartment." "What?" I blinked. "Why, she's had some financial setbacks, credit cards, that sort of thing." I nearly laughed. That's what happens when your entire wardrobe costs more than a semester of tuition. Mother didn't flinch. It's not the time for sarcasm, Zoe. She's in real need. She has nowhere else to go. Okay, I said slowly. And what does that have to do with me? And that's when she smiled, one of those tight-lipped, pity-drenched expressions that always meant I was about to lose something. Well, she said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a manila folder. Your father and I were reviewing things and, technically, the deed to this house is still in our name. I froze. What are you talking about? She set the folder on the porch railing, patting it like it was some helpful pamphlet. We never officially transferred ownership, sweetheart. It was always our property. We let you use it, of course, but now that Chelsea needs it. No, I said, my voice sharp. No, you gave it to me, her head tilted. We gave you the keys, that's not the same thing. The blood in my ears roared. I felt the porch beneath me shift as if the floorboards were suddenly made of sand. I've rebuilt this place, I said. With my money, my time, my hands. I know, she said gently. And we're grateful, but Chelsea needs stability right now. I stared at her in disbelief. You're giving my house to her. Zoe, she sighed like I was a child. Let's not make this ugly. You've done a wonderful job here, but it's still technically ours. And Chelsea is family too. We're not taking anything, we're just rearranging. I'm not a couch, I snapped. Her smile faltered. That's uncalled for. No, what's uncalled for is tossing me the ruins of your forgotten fire trap, and then ripping it out from under me the second she screws up again. Lower your voice, she warned. The neighbors. Let them hear, I shouted, heart pounding. Maybe they should see what kind of family I come from. We stood in silence, the kind that vibrates behind your ribs, then she picked up the folder again. We'll give you a few weeks to gather your things, she said, her voice back to polite. We're not monsters. And with that, she turned and walked off the porch like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just gutted me clean. I didn't follow her. I couldn't move. I stood there, breath caught somewhere in my chest while the weight of it all slammed down. I had given everything to this house. And it had never been mine. That night, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Every creak in the floorboards, every imperfect patch I'd painted with care, it all felt distant, like I was already a ghost in it. I left the porch light off. Didn't bother locking the door. What was the point? Marissa came over without asking. She let herself in with the key I gave her months ago, carrying 2 bottles of cheap red wine and a bag of microwave popcorn. She didn't say anything when she saw me curled up on the bare mattress, still in the hoodie I'd been wearing since morning. She just sat at the foot of the bed and handed me a glass. Drink, she said. I took it, but didn't sip. Fleetwood Mac played softly in the background, one of the records I hadn't boxed up yet. Landslide, how ironic. I should have known, I muttered, staring at the wall. Marissa leaned back on her elbows. What happened? I told her everything. The visit, the folder, the twisted smile. The legal language buried in parental concern. The way my mother had called me sweetheart while evicting me from the only thing I'd ever really built. When I finished, my voice was dry and flat. Like it wasn't even my story anymore. Marissa didn't interrupt once. She just nodded slowly and refilled my glass. So, she said eventually, they're really going to hand it to Chelsea. Yeah, and she's okay with that, taking it. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course she is. She probably thinks it's hers anyway. She probably thinks I borrowed it from her. Marissa looked around the room. Her eyes scanned the navy cabinets, the handmade shelves, the art prints we'd taped up with care. Then she turned to me with a calm, dangerous smile. Okay, she said. Let them have it. I blinked. What? You heard me, let them have it. My chest tightened. Marissa, I'm not just going to hand it over, not as it is. She sat up now, legs crossed, energy shifting. Not like this, not finished. I watched her, something in me slowly waking up. If they want this place so badly, she continued, then maybe we give it back the way they gave it to you. Silence settled in the room. And then I laughed, just once, short and sharp. It was absurd, it was petty, it was perfect. You want to wreck it, I said slowly. Not wreck, she replied, a wicked gleam in her eyes. Reset, let's take it back to how it started. No theft, no violence, just subtraction. I stared at her, the wine finally hitting warm in my chest. They said it was always theirs. So we're not taking anything that doesn't belong to us, she said calmly. Just moving your things out. A strange stillness came over me. The despair, the shame, the helplessness, it began to thin out. Not vanish entirely, but make space for something colder, sharper. What about the wiring? I asked. Marissa raised an eyebrow. Tell me more. I fixed most of it myself, I said. Some outlets are sketchy. I documented everything. I know what's safe and what isn't, she nodded. So if someone overloaded the system, I mean, it'd be unfortunate. A slow grin spread across her face. I looked down at my hands, dry from scrubbing, scarred from nails and splinters but steady. This house wasn't safe when they gave it to me, I whispered. Why should it be safe when I give it back? Marissa clinked her glass to mine. Now that's poetry. We sat like that for a while, sipping wine in the glow of the record player's orange light. Outside, the wind rustled through the broken fence. Inside, something new was blooming. Not grief. Not rage. Control. Finally, I wasn't waiting for someone to see me. I was going to make sure they did. The final days in the house were quiet in a way that felt reverent, like packing up a chapel before it got turned into a casino. I didn't play music, didn't light candles. Every action felt surgical. Marissa and I worked in total sync, wordless most of the time. We wrapped glassware in old dish towels, folded thrifted blankets into boxes, and carried what we could over to Carl's garage just after dark. He didn't ask questions, just unlocked the side door and nodded once. The cabinets too? He asked, arms crossed. I paused. Not the kitchen, I'm leaving that navy, Carl smirked. Good call, that's a statement piece. By the third trip, all that remained in the house was structural. Walls I couldn't carry, floors I'd sanded, fixtures we'd mounted with pride that now hung with indifference. The angel statue I'd packed that first. Marissa held it in her lap the entire drive to Carl's. This doesn't get ash on it again, she'd whispered, as if it were sacred. The night before Chelsea's move-in, we went through the wiring. I pulled out my notes, every sketch, every socket I'd labeled safe-ish or do not touch, and we reviewed the spots where the system still sputtered if pushed too hard. Marissa, flashlight in hand, stood on a ladder and loosened a kitchen socket just enough. We don't break it, we unsettle it, I nodded. The living room circuit trips when too many outlets are used. Remember the blender and the heater that one time? Yup, fried the toaster. Exactly, so that one's our fuse point. We weren't arsonists. We weren't setting a trap. We were simply walking away and letting the structure return to its original, crumbling state with one small push. Everything we'd added, light, color, life, was gone. And what remained, what they gave me. On the morning of the handoff, I didn't say goodbye to the house. I didn't touch the walls or breathe in any last memory. I just took one final look at the empty space where my record player had sat and closed the door. At 4:17 p.m., Chelsea pulled up in a moving truck, way too big for what little she probably had left. She stepped out in athleisure and wedge sneakers, phone already in hand, filming a selfie video. Say hi to my new place, besties. She chirped to her followers, spinning to show the red door behind her. I watched from the street corner, parked 2 houses down, engine off. Marissa sat in the passenger seat, chewing the edge of her straw like it was a cigar. She's plugging in the ring light, Marissa muttered, eyes on the window. Oh my God, that's outlet 1. I didn't speak, I could feel it happening. We'd loosened wires, unbalanced loads. Reset the power panel so it was just one overloaded breath away from collapse. A few more plugs, a few more switches, and then a spark, not loud, just the first. Then a flash behind the living room curtains. Then smoke. Black. Billowing, fast. The first scream didn't come until the fire had already found the ceiling beams. And when it did, sharp, panicked, unmistakably Chelsea, it sliced through the air like a siren. Marissa and I watched from the car, both silent. Neighbors began spilling out of their houses. Someone called 911. Someone else screamed Chelsea's name. She made it out, of course she did. Stumbling in socked feet, mascara streaked, clutching a small tote bag like it was a lifeline. And then she turned around. The house was engulfed. Flames curled along the porch railings, spat from the rooftop vents. Windows cracked and burst with soft pops as the heat pushed outward. I opened my door and stepped onto the sidewalk. My parents pulled up minutes later, screeching to a halt in matching horror. My mother ran toward Chelsea. My father just stood frozen, staring at the flames. Then his eyes found mine. I didn't speak, didn't shout. I just met his gaze with something colder than defiance. Truth. This is what you gave me, and this is what it gave you back. The fire department arrived too late to do anything but contain the damage. It was over in under an hour. The structure collapsed inward like a house folding into its own lie. Marissa stood beside me, arms crossed, as the last beam gave out and sent sparks into the dusky sky. She did this, I said softly, watching the neighbors whisper, the flames dyeing the sky orange. She pushed too hard. And no one questioned it, not the ones who'd watched me clean that porch for weeks. Not the ones who saw Chelsea walk in with her camera and her entitlement. The house was gone. But what mattered, I was still standing. The air still smelled like smoke the next morning. It clung to my clothes, to the inside of my car, to the back of my throat like something personal. I didn't sleep. Neither did Marissa. We ended up parked in Carl's driveway just before sunrise, sipping gas station coffee and watching the cleanup crews haul charred wood and twisted metal out of what used to be my home. Or theirs. Or no one's now. Across the street, Chelsea sat in their parents' SUV, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling numbly through her phone. Her eyes were red, not from the smoke. From the rage. She looked up once and saw me. She didn't look away. And neither did I, she knew. But she couldn't prove anything. Because when the firefighters inspected the damage, the first word out of the captain's mouth was faulty wiring. The sockets overloaded. The breakers failed. It was all textbook cause, and I had the receipts, I had the notes, the diagrams, the quiet warnings I gave my mother that the house still had issues when she brushed them aside with her gentle hand waves. They thought they could take what they didn't build, but they never asked if it would hold. As the last of the roof caved inward and the debris crew swept the sidewalk, I noticed the neighbors standing outside their homes, watching, not with judgment, with something else, quiet understanding. Carl stood near his fence, arms crossed, chin lifted in a slow, knowing nod. He didn't say anything, but I could read it in his face. He knew exactly what they'd done to me, and what I'd done in return. My parents approached as the last embers hissed out. My mother's face was drawn with grief and disbelief. One hand clutched her chest, the other still holding her planner like there was a page inside that could fix this. This was our home, she whispered. No, I said softly. It never was. My father narrowed his eyes. We gave you a chance, and this is what you do. You gave me a wreck, I snapped. You gave me ash and told me to make it a palace. And when I did, you tried to take it back. You don't get to cry now. Chelsea stepped out of the car, arms folded tight. You did this, she hissed, low and seething. You did this, I said back, even quieter. You pushed too hard. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of everything they never admitted. Every slight, every scrap of unequal love, every why can't you be more like her. And for once they had nothing to say. I walked away before they could find the words, because I already had mine, and I'd said them all. A week after the fire, I watched a man from Craigslist load my mid-century coffee table into the back of his pickup. He didn't ask why I was selling it. I didn't offer. It had been sitting in Carl's garage, along with the rest of the furniture Marissa and I rescued. Those warm gold accent chairs, the kitchen stools we'd painted a matte forest green, a few vintage mirrors, even the half-melted angel statue I had quietly wrapped in a fleece blanket and placed in the back of a plastic storage bin. Piece by piece, I was letting it go. Carl stood nearby, arms folded, watching the man drive off. You sure you're okay with this? He asked, motioning toward the remaining items. I'm sure, I said, even though it ached a little. They're just things. You built it all from scratch. Which means I can do it again, I said, surprised at how certain my voice sounded. He nodded. You're tougher than you look, Zoe, I smiled. Yeah, turns out I had to be. The insurance drama was a mess. Chelsea had plugged in a ring light, a curling iron, 2 space heaters, and an electric wine chiller all into one overloaded strip. The report made it crystal clear. Negligence. That one word killed their payout. No check, no rebuild, no magical rescue. I heard later that my parents had to refinance part of their own home to cover cleanup costs. I didn't ask, I didn't gloat, I simply stepped back, because it was no longer my burden. I picked up extra shifts at the cafe. Returned to my routines. Marissa, always in my corner, helped me list and sell every item we'd stored, and bit by bit I scraped together enough for a security deposit. The new place wasn't much, but it would be mine. I'd learned something in those weeks, not just how to tile a bathroom or sand floors, but how to stand when everything you built was stripped away. And more importantly, how not to ask for space that I could claim myself. I didn't tell my parents where I moved. I didn't give Chelsea my number again. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about that. I just felt free. 1 year later, my apartment smells like citrus and fresh paint. The space is small, studio-sized, with uneven floorboards and windows that rattle when the wind gets serious, but I love it like it's a crown jewel. Walls are lined with framed sketches Marissa gifted me, one of the red front door, another of our navy cabinets, and a third of a broken angel, glued back together in soft pencil strokes. Marissa sits across the tiny dining table now, eating cold noodles from the takeout container and laughing at a comment someone left on our blog. "Listen to this," she says between bites. "Is it normal to cry while watching someone rip up linoleum? You're making people emotional with grout." I grin. We're artists of the broken. What started as a private journal has grown into a community, second chances and sawdust. I write about rebuilding, not just houses, lives, choices, boundaries. We host workshops on Saturdays, mostly women, mostly tired, mostly ready to reclaim something. I don't tell them my full story, not right away. But when someone eventually asks about the fire, and they always do, I just smile softly and say, sometimes the only way to rebuild is to burn down what never belonged to you. Then I sip my coffee, look around my mismatched, beautiful little home, and feel the kind of peace that doesn't come from having more. It comes from knowing what to never accept again.